A matrix process basically comprises two elements, an item list and some assessments. So the item list, in my example, I'm doing a risk list. So this will be a list of potential risks to the business, and in a lot of cases organizations already have this list, so they're going to use the same list and assess the same items every time. However, you may be at the beginning of your risk journey and you're creating this from scratch, or somewhere in between. You've got a risk list, but you need to be able to add more risks to it or amend existing ones. So that's what this video is going to focus on. We are not focusing in this particular video on how to create the assessments. I've got a process with assessments already set up. I've got 3 of them, and I can see that very clearly on my risk list because those are my columns. So assessment 1 is impact, assessment 2 is likelihood, and assessment 3 is control. The risk score is my impact multiplied by my likelihood. So that's all been set in advance. So we're not covering that now. So let's have a look at how these risk lists are built and amended. So I'm going to double click on my first one, which is fire in the control room. So let's double click on that. And this is where I go to edit it. So if I needed to add some more information, I can just type it along the end there. I could completely change all of that text by just highlighting it and over typing it. So this is where you go to edit your risk description. The next important one is this box here, short name. So I've just used the word fire. When I show my heat map, next to risk A, so it will have a plot point of A, and next to it, it will say the word fire. If you're using a risk register and you already have unique IDs for your risks, so maybe that's a short code or number, you can change that here. So let's say this one is actually risk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example. That is what's going to then appear on your heat map. So that's how it's constructed and that's how it's edited. Now it's all well and good. I've added a bit of information to that one. I've now got 2 risks, but what about if I had a third one? So how do I add more risks to my list? And there's 2 different ways of doing this, and I'm going to show you the way I would do it if I was in the workshop and somebody asked me to add another one, or any time where I'm adding just a single risk, not a whole list of risks. So to do that, I'd click on insert, and then I get the editor box like we saw for the fire one, but this one's blank. So I'm going to put in here a new risk for my list. So this could be whatever description you like for that risk, and then the short name for this one I'm going to say is 54321, and that is another one added. So I've now got 3 items. Now I can imagine some of you would be groaning right now because you've got to put in 25 or more risks into here, and it's going to take you all day going in and copying and pasting into those boxes or typing them out. So the way I would do it if I had a larger list of items, if I've got more than one to put in, is I would copy that list from elsewhere. The easiest place to take these from is Excel, and the reason for that is you can bring across not only the risk description but also the risk ID, the short name. So if I just move across to Excel, and I've only got 2 items in my risk list, but obviously you could have loads. So the first column is the risk ID or the short name, and then the second column is my risk description. Now if I just take all of that and highlight it, so if I had a big list I would be highlighting all the way down obviously, but this is all I've got, and I'm just going to copy that, come across to matrix, and to paste it in, if you hold down Control and press V and then let go, that is a short way of pasting in. And there are those other 2 that we just saw in Excel. So if I just double click on there, you can see it's brought the short name across as well as the description. So that's how I would normally work with my list. The other thing to be conscious of when you're working with the list is whether or not this ID column is green. So what this is telling me is that when I run my voting, it will vote on item A, then B, then it will skip C because I've got that switched off, and then it will vote on D, and then it will invite everybody to vote on E. So it's only going to ask people to vote on items that have got that green fill against them. So if you're wanting to do these in all different orders, so let's say right now in the room we've got all the right people to vote on item D, I would turn all of the others off at this point. We'll vote on item D. As soon as we've voted on that, it will go straight to our heat map and show the results for item D. If we then have somebody come in after that and we've now got everyone we need to do A, we might well turn D off because we finished. All of the average scores will get added here once we've voted on these, but we can turn that off and say now we only want to vote on and plot item A. When we've finished and we've got data for all of our risks, what we're most likely going to do is turn them all to green, because then when we go to our heat map, it will show all of them plotted. So that's the key to remember. That green tells you two things. Will it get voted on at this point, and will it plot on the graph? So you've got a choice. You can either have them all on, and we can do this in quite a linear way. So what would happen now if I started voting is it would vote all three assessments for item A, and then it would move straight on to item B and start on the impact assessment and go all the way through, and then C all the way through, D all the way through, and so forth until it finishes the list. When all of the voting has finished, that's when it's going to generate that heat map for you. So this is really key to notice. And the only other thing on your list that's going to have a fill colour that's generated based on information is the info one right next to it. So all of those are just white at the moment, and the reason for that is I haven't added any comments to any of my risks. So let's go into fire. So to go into that one, double click, and this, as a reminder, is where you would go to edit it and add your short names, but we can also add any notes or comments that relate to that risk. So this might be done before the workshop starts, or you might come back to the list and do this during the workshop. If there's something key that you want to type into here so that it comes out into your report, you can do so. Alternatively, of course, you can keep your notes and comments separately. If you want to write those down for pen and paper or have another laptop to take notes on, you can do that. What I wouldn't recommend is you jumping in and out of the matrix process to put notes into another software. So if you're going to be only using one computer and you don't want to handwrite them, please use this. So I'm just going to say here is my comment, just so I've got something for the fire risk, and you can see that's now gone green. So essentially that's how you put a list together. There are some other things that you can do with your list. So one thing is, if you wanted to, let's say we wanted to delete something, so we want to get rid of C. We can either deselect it and it will always be ignored, but every time that we come and look at the list it will still be there, or we can go in and actually remove it. So if I right click on here and I say remove item, it says, are you sure you want to remove item C, a new risk for my list? I can say yes. Now at this point that works fine. When it won't work is once you've got data. So if we'd already voted on items A and B or whatever, or even just A, the moment we've started voting, it will not let us delete any items from the list. It tries to protect the whole thing once there's data attached. So get your list right before you start. If you've already started voting and you want one of the risks not to be used, just go with the option that I showed you before of deactivating it. So it's still there, but it's deactivated. Another thing you can do is bulk delete things if there's no data. So let's say we want to get rid of C and D. If I deactivate them both, right click, and then I go into remove items, plural. So we did remove item to get rid of item, the previous item C. What I want to do is remove all the inactive items. So the active ones are A and B because they're green, inactive are C and D. So remove inactive items and they're gone. So that should be quite a good starting point for anybody just getting used to how to create a risk list in Matrix.